I think we're all aware that promises in crypto are a source of a lot of the drama because it turns out that making crypto promises is easy, but making them come true can turn out to be difficult. If the only promise you really want to hear right now is that one day things will be better in crypto, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. All right, welcome everybody. I know I knew we were gonna have a light crowd tonight. In fact, I almost put this one off because I knew the Oscars would take a lot of people's attention tonight, but that's okay. We got a few people and I appreciate it. Hilldog is here. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go, Hilldog. At first you were the only one here, but then, of course. But then Rulo's here and Otis Frichov is here. Thank you. NMXP3LB is here. He says, hello, it's Nick from Minneapolis. Thanks for joining, Nick from Minneapolis. Joe Davidson's here. AOS, please give me the strength to not rain holy fire down on my fiat job for violating OSHA, then threatening me not to report it. Yeah, that's not right. I don't know the context. This is not advice of any kind, but yeah, I don't think that's supposed to be happening. I think you are experiencing something that's not supposed to be happening. Obviously, I don't know the context, but that does not sound right, Joe Davidson. I think you got to do something. Omar Wright is here. Omar, let's fucking go. Joe Davidson, tell me to be the bigger person. So if they're violating the law, you know, I mean, it's you know, obviously your career, so you got to make your own decisions. But you know, if someone was violating the law and human safety was at stake, you know, if humans might get hurt for you not reporting it, that's you know, that kind of becomes like an ethical issue right there. So regardless of what's better for your career, it kind of becomes an ethical issue. But obviously, you know, you obviously have to make the decision. But if it's report it and maybe preserve human safety versus not report it, it's kind of an ethical issue, I think. Daniil's here. Who watches the Oscars? That's right. Who watches these damn Oscars? Hilldog says AOS over Oscars every time. Thank you, Hilldog. Brown Beardo's here. Just popped in. Let's fucking go. No way Oscars are better than AOS. Thank you, Hooji Whammer. Thank you. Otis Frichov said, nope, retaliation is kind of against the law. Yeah, yeah, I know, you know, as far as being an OSHA whistleblower, this is kind of like the purest form of whistleblower because we're talking about human safety. So not to say that some employer might not violate the law and retaliate against you, but Brown Weirdo says, seems time for some malicious compliance. Yeah, malicious compliance. Well put. Joe Davidson says, okay, hellfire shall be cast. Holy is too nice for them. Sorry for derailing. What's on the docket today? Okay, yeah, let's hit it. So we're going to talk about a little Cardano drama. And I actually don't think so. We've just been talking about an ethical kind of morality issue. I think maybe that's not the best lens through which to view what's going on in Cardano right now. Sort of two different, totally unrelated things going on. And there's this like tendency in crypto to always recast everything. Anytime there's a problem or drama, people want to cast it in terms of good and evil, bad and good, you know, miscreant and angel. And it's seldom like that, right? It's seldom that one side of an issue is the demonic side and the other side, they're like complete angels. And even when it's just like the community versus a particular entity or project, you know, a lot of times that project will get labeled, you know, the evil demonic side of the debate. And it always turns out it's not really as bad as it seems to be, except for the robbery forest shit. The robbers can go to hell. Fuck the robbers. But when it comes to our own Cardano projects or our own Cardano entities, it seldom turns out to be the case that somebody's just doing something because they're evil and greedy. Although it almost always gets cast that way. Almost always you'll find people on Cardano Twitter. And this isn't just us. This is every single crypto ecosystem. I say Cardano because we're all in Cardano, but this could equally apply to any ecosystem. Cardano is no worse than the rest. We're pretty much exactly the same. But you'll always find somebody in Cardano X who is casting whoever is the target of the scrutiny as evil and greedy. Always, it's like blank entity is evil and greedy, blank project, blank founder, evil and greedy, right? It's always like some shade of that. And it seldom turns out to be the case. Oftentimes, there's nuance. And it turns out they wanted to do something a certain way and they couldn't quite do it that way. Where they really seem to be the target of a lot of fire, though, is when they've made promises. And this is a really big problem in crypto because every project, it's sort of like their main goal is to develop a lot of interest. And the way they do that is by making either overt or implied promises. And then down the road, it becomes hard to make the promises true. Things come up, things become complicated. There's complexity and ambiguity, and it becomes hard to make the promises true. And that's when a lot of these projects find themselves on the receiving end of a lot of fire. And I mean, to their credit, though, you could almost say, like, I'll never forget when the Fire Festival, when that documentary came out, a lot of entrepreneurs and founders watched the documentary and they were like 100% on the side of the founder of the Fire Festival because they were like, that's how it works. You've got to sell your enterprise and then make it true later. That's exactly not what we want to hear on the side, all of us on the side of retail. That's exactly what you don't want to hear. You don't want to hear that the founders are making promises and then figuring out how to make them true later. That's the exact opposite of what we want. But it's remarkable how many founders, when commenting on that documentary, you know which documentary this is. This is the one where the dude created the music festival in the Caribbean and he sold a bunch of tickets for it. And it was like, hey, we're going to throw this super exclusive, fire festival in the Caribbean. We're going to create a whole village for you to live in. There's going to be really cool. It's a really cool tropical island. You're going to have really like luxe accommodations. And then he didn't even have any bands booked. He kind of just like talked I can't remember how many musical acts into showing up, and he sold a lot of tickets for this thing, and people showed up, and it was on this like desert island, and he had set up a bunch of super cheap tents for them to like sleep in, but there were not enough anyways. Things like bathrooms, huge problem. Watch the documentary if you don't remember this thing. But like I said, the astounding thing was how many founders watched that documentary and were like, this guy's the best. I love this guy. This founder's the best because he sold it and then he tried to make it true. He failed, granted, but at least he sold it. This is exactly what we don't want to hear on the side of retail, and especially not in crypto. So I'm not of the same persuasion. I'm not taking the same perspective as those guys. I just wanted to present that weird alternative approach to these kind of issues. So let's kind of jump into it. Let's hit the comments first, and then we'll jump into it. I think everybody knows at least one of the projects we're going to talk about today. I won't even call it the project because it's not really the project we're talking about. It's the immediate drama controversy going on right now. But there's also another one we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the specific project in just a second. At a certain point, even Jesus started flipping tables. There you go, Joe. Go get him. Go get him. If we can't even implement a video game through blockchain, I don't see anything happening. Oh, yes, I know the Fire Festival situation well. Thanks to Internet Historian. There you go. I appreciate your videos, AOS. Haven't been watching much since you crawled out of the mines, but thanks, and keep my staking interest growing. Let's go. Derek, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that, Derek C. Thank you very much. I mean, that's how I feel, right? Morale is really low right now. And, for good reason. I just take that as granted. Joe Davidson says, saw in a post recently that 13 tokens exist in the crypto market. You're talking about like 13 million, right? Like 13 million tokens exist. Lots of ports for not much attention. True. implement a game through blockchain. That's Infinity Rising. It sure is. Okay, let's jump in and talk about this issue. So I think most of you have probably already seen this. Um, and I'm not. We're not in the muckraking business around here, right? Um, I think you could easily have like a very you could have there would be a lot. I'll put it this way: there'd be a lot of fodder for like yellow journalism. I'm not a journalist, first of all. I'm just a commentator. Definitely no kind of. I'm not any kind of journalist, nor do I pretend to be one. But somebody could do a lot of tabloid style yellow journalism in crypto. There's so much fodder for it. So we're gonna look at this through a slightly different lens. Um, I'm gonna pose the question. Maybe we should give some of these projects a little more credit for basically just encountering complexity versus being evil and greedy. So that's the way we're going to look at this. But here's the deal. So this came up. This governance proposal came up for a project, the people around I actually like. I find the people around this project to be quite endearing. Like DC, the CEO. I'll never forget when he was when Stranger Things was first really popular, and he was like working out one time, and he basically made this post about his love for the Kate Bush song and how he's listening to it during a workout. It was like very endearing post from a crypto founder. So I like the people around this project, but they are at the center of a little controversy right now. So this proposal came up. The Liquid DAO on-chain governance. You don't know what Liquid is. Vast majority of you do. It's a lending platform in Cardano. The Liquid DAO on-chain governance voting for Proposal 118 to select the allocation of the night airdrop has completed, with Proposal 14 receiving majority vote. This distribution option is 10% allocated to ADA suppliers, 90% allocated to the Liquid DAO. And I'm not going to read, there's going to be a lot of text around this controversy. We're not going to read it all tonight because we're going to put everybody to sleep. We're going to put people to sleep. So we're just going to hit the high points. So don't think this is a complete accounting of both sides of the controversy here. If you want to know everything about this and hear everybody's full argument, just go ahead and read all these posts and you'll get a much better accounting. We're just going to hit the high points here. D.U, thank you. D.U says, like has not been forgotten. It has been engaged and algorithms have been boosted. Thank you. Boca Jade Zaravla, thank you. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate you saying that. So anyways, this was the vote. You can, just looking at these numbers, you can immediately understand what's going on here. So during the temperature check and on-chain voting process, we have seen significant misinformation and misconceptions regarding this governance proposal. We'd like to clarify several points. So you could, looking at these numbers though, 10% to the ADA suppliers, 90% to the Liquid DAO. You know what I'm going to say about this. If you self-custody your own shit, none of this is a problem, right? If you had your ADA locked in a platform, this kind of shit is possible. If you self-custody your shit, this would not be a problem at all, right? So we don't need to address that. I talk about that plenty on this channel, but you put your little ADA lobsters, you let them crawl around the ocean floor, and you send them into a cave. It might turn out to not be a cave, but they might slowly get hoisted up onto a ship, right? And in this case, it wasn't the little ADA lobsters, but it was the night airdrop tokens that were supposed to go to the holders of those little ADA lobsters if they had been self-custody. The current controversy is if those little ADA lobsters are locked into the Liquid platform, who gets it? The people who supplied the ADA, the people who locked their ADA in the platform, or the governance token holders? And the vote was 90% goes to the governance token holders, 10% to the people who locked it in the platform. So you can imagine the ADA suppliers not going to be stoked about this. The DAO people going to be pretty stoked. So this is the problem with all this. So during the temperature, okay, so we hit that part. Why was this decided through a DAO governance vote? The decision to allocate the airdrop through DAO governance follows the core principles of decentralized finance. When I read stuff like that, I have to ask myself, what Dewey Decimal number is that under? Yeah, so I ask, what Dewey Decimal Number is that book under? This treatise that describes the core principles of decentralized finance. Like, who decides? Who decides what are the core principles of decentralized finance? Like, this is the kind of stuff we talk about on this channel. This is sort of crypto philosophy stuff. But the problem is, people have very different viewpoints on what would be the core principles of decentralized finance. So before we go on, let's hit the comments now that everybody knows what we're talking about here. The first thing, we're going to talk about a totally different thing that is in the same genre of things. Liquid need to do a prepaid credit card with cash back in ADA. So basically that money would be out of supply. Wow. I haven't heard any, that's a different angle. That's definitely a different angle. I like that you're doing some outside of the box thinking though. I haven't seen anybody propose that. In the comments related to this controversy. But LQ Barometer says LQ should have known how this would play out till now. I bet we were going to see some extremely poor communications. Yeah, I mean, this was, to me, I would also agree. This was very, as soon as I found out this vote was going down, I thought to myself, they couldn't possibly have charted this course, without knowing that if the vote went in the direction of the DAO, there would be mad controversy. They must have known this would produce mad controversy. Family G7 says, well, I was told that Liquid said they were going to give it to whoever put ADA supply. Okay, we're going to cover that. We're actually going to cover that. So here's what they have to say. I think there are a few important points to hit. So they say a few additional points to clarify miscommunication surrounding this process. The recipient of the night airdrop is a Cardano smart contract address governed by the Liquid protocol. Both before and following the night snapshot, it was unknown if claiming the night allocation would be technically feasible for Liquid or AMM DEXs because of the way Plutus validators are implemented as a stake key linked to an ADA liquidity pool smart contract address. ADA suppliers on Liquid and LPs on AMM DEXs did not know whether they'd be eligible to claim. So you can see there's already a level of complexity. There's a level of technical complexity. They didn't even know if they would be able to claim this ADA. It's already getting complicated. Just one paragraph, and that was a little bit of a word salad for some people. Some people heard me read that and they have no idea what that means because we're getting into this area of complexity and ambiguity. Here's the root of the controversies always. It's always this complexity, this nuance. The Liquid Labs core team had to create a specific transaction to claim the airdrop from that smart contract address on behalf of the DAO. So already this article is laying out that the core team had to create a special transaction on behalf, and they say it was on behalf of the DAO. So this is an interesting choice of words because you could have also written this. The Liquid Labs core team had to create a specific transaction to claim the airdrop from the smart contract address on behalf of, you could have gone the other direction, on behalf of the ADA suppliers. You could argue that they could only do it on behalf of the DAO because the DAO governs the smart contract address or something like that. I'm sure they have their own logic as to why it had to be on behalf of the DAO. I'm just pointing out you could have typed different words there. Different words could have been typed there. And I'm sure someone could come up with logic to explain an argument why it should have been on behalf of the ADA suppliers. All cash flows and protocol parameters within the Liquid protocol are governed by the Liquid DAO. In practice, LQ token holders ultimately decide. So the thing is, and this is a thing about kind of all DAOs, right? Who's usually in a DAO, not this one, I'm just saying generally in crypto, who's going to have a lot of DAO tokens? The insiders, right? The insiders are going to end up having, usually, not always, could be different, but often the insiders are going to end up having a lot of DAO tokens. This is pretty common in crypto. The insiders have a lot of DAO tokens because the airdrop was claimable only by a protocol controlled smart contract address. It is considered a cash flow received by the protocol. Therefore, the appropriate mechanism to decide its allocation is an on-chain DAO vote. So now you've kind of got the gist of it. You can understand what's going on here. On that question of how many DAO tokens the team has, they also point this out. An equal amount of LQ DAO tokens have been distributed between the community and the core team. So that makes it sound like, and they point out it's been transparent. The amount of the allocation to the team has been on a vesting schedule and has been transparently made public to the community for years. So, I don't think anybody has any questions about that part. I think everybody knows that the core team had a lot of DAO tokens. Here they say an equal amount went to the community and the team. So there you go. Once again, the insiders have a lot of control over the DAO, right? I won't say complete control or anything like that, or majority control, but they have quite a chunk of DAO tokens. At least they were distributed quite a chunk here. So let's jump to the part that caused all the trouble. Because I mean, you can argue, you can see how this could go either way, but you can imagine what kind of controversy we're about to get into here. So here is a video that was posted that pointed out some posts, and somebody was referencing these in the comments just a second ago. So before we hit that, 8 Clips makes a very good point here. Complaints to OSHA can be made anonymously. So they can to OSHA, as far as I know. But if you've already been complaining about the exact same issue to your company, and then suddenly they hear that there was an OSHA complaint about the exact same issue, if you were the only one complaining about it, they're going to know it was you. But like we pointed out, retaliation over OSHA complaints is not supposed to be a thing. And, most people also would not want somebody to be hurt when they could have made a complaint. So there's that. But Family G7 says, yeah, but those that have money there are also getting rewarded. Okay. Puckyok, hello, let's go. So here's the problem that somebody in the comments pointed out. So this appears to be a post from back in August of last year. ADA lenders will receive 100% of NIGHT, even if their supplied ADA is used as collateral for a loan. All of a sudden, we've got a problem. There's also a post down here. We are fully committed to getting LQ back to its all-time high, likely eating. Okay, no, sorry, that was a slightly different post. But you can watch this video. This is a 7-minute long video, but I think this is the crux of it. People are claiming there were posts that purported to, promise the ADA suppliers, the ADA lenders, their NIGHT tokens. So that's kind of what this looks like to me. This looks like a promise. ADA lenders, or we'll just call it a statement. ADA lenders will receive 100% of NIGHT, even if their supplied ADA is used as collateral for a loan. NIGHT distribution to liquid ADA lenders will be the same as Cardano staking rewards, since liquid V1 mainnet launch ADA lenders have received 100% of staking rewards. So this gets a little more complicated, right? NIGHT distribution to lenders will be the same as Cardano staking rewards, since liquid V1 mainnet launch ADA lenders have received 100% of staking rewards. So it's already getting a little complicated in that second paragraph. First paragraph, ADA lenders will receive 100% of NIGHT. So you can see how people would have assumed that this would not be a 90-10 distribution as the vote turned out, right? So of course, there was more. So Paul actually did some really good coverage on this issue. So Paul, as he always does, but very good coverage on this issue, especially as the top vote only got 48%. You can see here, proposal 14, 48.35%, and not over the 50% mentioned in the liquid governance docs. Does this mean it's not valid, or how does this go forward? So there's even questions about whether or not the vote. So this vote, proposal 14, obviously got the most votes, but it wasn't over 50%. And Paul is making the point that somewhere in the documents right here, proposals are considered successful and may be executed if 50% of the votes submitted are in favor of the proposal. So I haven't gone through all the liquid docs because I'm not wrapped up in liquid governance, but that appears to be a liquid governance doc, and I trust Paul. Paul is probably dead on about, I would guess he's dead on about this. And that looks like a 48% vote. So already we've got this complexity, right? There's this complexity. Whoever wrote that article from Liquid is saying, hey, this was a protocol controlled smart contract address. This has to be up to DAO governance. And then we see the promises in this last post, what looks like a statement that ADA lenders will receive 100%. And then we find more complexity. It's like, wait a second, this definitely got the most votes, but it says a successful proposal vote action requires 50%. Things are getting very, very complicated. Already there's so much nuance and complication in this, you know. I mean, you can ascribe whatever malattributes to the motivation you want, but an alternate explanation could be this just got really complicated and some, statements that were made didn't match up with how it looked like things actually had to be decided, right? It's like we don't know who wrote this post, but maybe they didn't understand how the night airdrop was actually going to go down, that it was going to be delivered to that smart contract, and somebody would turn around and say, no, the DAO has to govern what happens to those because it went to a protocol smart contract address. So you can see there's some complication here, even within this DAO and the statements that the Liquid team is making on this account. You can understand maybe this person and another person had conflicting views over how this was supposed to go down. It's a lot of complexity, right? So Charles took note of this. Charles took note. So Charles took note, and Liquid took note of Charles taking note. You can imagine they realized this was becoming very high profile. So Charles says, this just came to my attention and we'll have a look. Liquid says, hey, Charles, please also have a look at this article we posted yesterday. It provides the full context of this recent governance vote. At this point, I think the Liquid team probably realized this was going to be a high level controversy. I can't imagine they didn't know that ahead of time. I think they must have known ahead of time this was going to be some controversy. So then Charles came out with this video. When did this come out? Yesterday afternoon, Charles came out with this video, and his take kind of made sense to me. He said, hey, I read the article. I know there's some controversy over the fact that this went into like a protocol controlled smart contract address, and the DAO is supposed to govern those, but also that's not really consistent with the post that was highlighted there, that obviously, I'm putting words in his mouth right now, but obviously would have led people to believe that they were going to get those night tokens. So if people read that post back in August thinking, and of course, you'd have to take into account when the actual snapshot was, because I don't know if that post was before or after the snapshot, all those kind of issues. People are claiming there were various posts. I haven't cared enough to go back and look at every single Liquid post on this topic in the history of Liquid. Other people have. Other people have. There are conflicting views on this point, but obviously a post like that would make people, you could understand how somebody would see a post like that and not think they were going to end up in a situation where it'd be a 90-10 split, right? And you can make your own decisions on whether or not those kinds of posts were made before or after the snapshot and all those kind of timeline issues. But we're just getting into more and more complexity. And the Liquid team, of course, is just saying this is getting higher and higher profile. Charles is making videos about it now. This is going to be about as high profile as it could possibly be inside the Cardano ecosystem. So how will this turn out? I don't know. What Charles proposes is something that's kind of hard to debate when I hear it. So what Charles proposes is, hey, probably what should happen, because we just read in their article that it was an equal distribution of DAO governance tokens between the team and the public. Charles proposes, hey, probably what you should do is have a revote, and the team should abstain. See what the community actually wants to do without the team. If the team abstains from the voting, what actually happens? And I think, between me and all of you, I think we can all guess what happens to that vote if the team does not vote. just knowing that the team has half the tokens. I don't know. I haven't like polled all of the non-team holders of DAO governance tokens. I have no idea what the sentiment is, but if I had to take a wild guess, I think I could guess what the outcome of that same vote would be if the insiders were not voting. You guys can tell me in the comments how you think that vote would go if the team wasn't voting. Hey, Flower Me, how's it going? Let's go. Let's go. So Charles makes a good point here, and it's kind of a problem for Liquid. They said, "Hey, the Liquid insiders, hey, we understand where you and the others in the community are coming from. We will have next steps to share shortly." I haven't heard those next steps yet. I would imagine they're gonna get together. They're going to get together tomorrow. The Liquid, if it was me, what I would be expecting if I were on the inside of that company is that they'd probably have a big meeting about it on Monday and figure out how they want to deal with it. Because this is kind of a nightmare for any crypto project. The issue goes super high profile. Everybody's talking about it. The founder of the ecosystem is making videos about it. And, I'm also guessing they know how that vote would go if they're not in it. Chris Lacato says another video today says Cardano XRP rejected by Wall Street is a bad thing. I have no idea what video that is. I don't. Yeah, I mean, who on Wall Street? And you asked the right question though. Is that a bad thing? And in some ways, I would argue being rejected by Wall Street if you're a crypto project is a good thing in the long run. So we'll see. Flower Me says Liquid is becoming an ice cube. An ice cube. So okay. Yeah, this I can only imagine that Liquid is gonna have some tough discussions tomorrow to decide what they want to do, but it'll be interesting. So that all is going on. Let's see, what did we have here? Okay, that's the same one. Sorry, that's the same one, guys. Okay, so another similar kind of issue. This one isn't about promises made. This isn't about a DAO. This is about one of our founding entities. And it's actually about the one that we have the least amount of drama over ever, right? The one that has the least amount of drama. And it's actually somebody new to the company, new to this founding entity, not too new, but he wasn't there from the start. So we're going to cover something about the founding entity we don't talk about as much. So Brown Beardo says, after the conflict broke the news, a new vote will only go one way. If they had put up the correctly worded and the team recused itself in the first place, it would have been a fair vote. Yeah, it's hard to debate that logic. It's hard. I mean, it's hard to debate with you on that logic. I also find what you said to be persuasive. Otis Fricho says, all I heard was to keep my staking where it's at. So when partner chains go live on Cardano and give airdrops, I'm good. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, people in the ecosystem, in any crypto ecosystem, try to shame you into locking your shit up with other people, which is such a weird thing. But they try to shame you, right? They're like, you're not contributing to TVL. Why won't you lock your shit up in somebody else's DeFi contract, right? Lock your ADA up. There's a lot of shaming going on over that. And then shit like this happens. And everybody remembers like, oh yeah, there are benefits to self-custody. Self-custody, as Otis Fricho points out, is great because you never have to deal with any of this shit. This would never happen for any of those people if they kept self-custody. So obviously that's not the premise on which DeFi has traditionally been engineered. But let's talk about Emergo. So here's another guy who I like. I don't know him. I don't know him or DC, but I like them both. I like a lot of the things they have posted in their time in Cardano. DC obviously in a long longer than Philip Pond, but Philip Pond is the guy at Emergo these days. He's the CEO of Emergo, and he seems to be doing a great job so far. I think he's doing a great job so far. And here he has a very thoughtful, well laid out post addressing a certain issue. And I think it's a very reasonable take on this issue. It's a very reasonable post. So he's responding. He says, hi, I'm writing this now on a Sunday because I saw your post about stepping back from midnight content. So this is not me. He's responding to this poster right here. We cannot afford another Cardano well situation where we lose a vital community voice because of friction or a lack of clarity. I listened to the snippet from IOHK Charles. I think he's trying to help diffuse, so I'm grateful for his ongoing support of Emergo. I had intended to wait until Monday in Singapore as I wanted to learn all the issues that community cared most about. To be honest, I know I won't be able to satisfy everyone. There are some people who just want to see us fail. And then he goes on to say it's good. These guys are pushing for true transparency and fairness. I want you to know that I don't just hear you. I recognize the validity of what you're and others like Dory Coin are saying. So what he's addressing, what the drama around Emergo lately has been that the Yoroi wallet has collected a gigantic amount of DRep delegation. And people are like, hey, this centralizes the DRep voting power. It's not actually good. You should make it easier for people to delegate somewhere other than the Emergo Yoroi DRep, because that's too big. You're centralizing the voting power inside our ecosystem, and it's making our governance less decentralized. So here's where it gets interesting. To be completely candid, I've been having active discussions with the CF about the very issues you've raised. I've been contemplating capping or even reducing Emergo's voting power to ensure we don't become a point of centralization. I think they already are. To be fair, I think they already are a point of centralization. Fred can attest to this. In fact, he recently directed me to a university professor specializing in blockchain governance. I spoke with him last week and asked him the same tough questions. His response surprised me, and it's changed how I looked at the problem. There's a formal paper coming out in a couple months that explores this exact dynamic on Cardano. While I know that feels too late for the current heat of the moment, I've committed to having Yoroi participate in the study so we can use data to fix this. To address your 2 points directly, decentralization and Emergo's power. I agree that a founding entity holding too much sway is antithetical to our core tenets. Thank you. That's reasonable and true. I am open to concessions here. Still, there has to be a place for casual ADA holders to delegate to DReps who actually vote every time, who provide rationales, and who can be held accountable like what you are doing now. For better or worse, we are one of those places. Yes, but you are not the only one. There are others. There are other DReps who vote. Still, I think the more important concession to make is the one below. Yoroi, UI, UX. You are 100% right. It should be easier to find and select diverse DReps. We shouldn't be defaulting into a position of power through better placement. The tech should empower choice. I believe Sir Corin wrote some scripts on this. My tech team told me about, so we are looking into it. What I will tell you is this. I will commit to building an easier governance center for Yoroi wallet where choosing other DReps is at least a drop-down menu or click. I will direct a squad on Monday to review the scripts. And if they're easy to implement, we will either work to deploy them or do better. I will also put a pause on your Yoroi wallet accumulating any more voting power. Thank you. This is good. Until the governance center is complete, I'm not a technologist, so I don't know if that requires us to resubmit to Apple Store or Google Play, but I will get you an update on Monday after I speak with the tech team. I just need you to know the intent is there. This is good. It sounds like he's actually trying to make it easier for people who use Yoroi as their main wallet to actually delegate elsewhere. The governance center will take a couple of sprints, but I will publicly commit to fixing it. I also have a serious ask for these two social media accounts and others in the community. Once we address the above, Emergo, how do we address the rest of the top 25? So this to me is a little, comparatively, it's a little bit of a straw man because the real concentration, I mean, it's a giant concentration in like the top 5. It's like we definitely need to address the top 5-ish, not even the top 5. It's like a top 3 or 4, really. We definitely need to address those first. Like the number 25, I'm not too worried about, but the top 3 or 4, that's a huge voting block. The top 5, this is a gigantic voting block. Like the top 25, and also it's like very difficult to do anything to decentralize, like the top 25 DRep. But the top, 5, there's some massive concentration there. Alliances will form or have formed. Outside entities will enter who may not have best interests of the community at heart. So I don't know how much, I'm sure some people have decided to vote together, but honestly, not. I'm sure that's a thing, but honestly, I think it's like kind of a drop in the bucket compared to the concentration in voting in the top 5 DReps. And among those are, this wallet, this Yoroi wallet. If we don't solve the underlying mechanism, we're just kicking the can down the road. Yeah, but the top 5 is a real big thing. Furthermore, how do we reach the 75% who don't vote? If they stay silent, the fate of Cardano is left to 10 to 15 DReps. Yeah, I don't know if this is solvable. How do we reach the 75% who don't vote? It's permissionless, so I don't know. The professor shared that voter apathy is actually the biggest issue to governance. We see this in real life too. Yeah, I mean, this is like just a human problem. It's not even a crypto problem. And then he wants to talk to that poster in on some kind of a call. So I thought this is a pretty reasonable. This is a pretty reasonable position. He wants to make it easier for your Roy wallet users to delegate to other DReps. I don't know if it's pretty high hanging fruit to try to decentralize the number 25 DRep, decentralize their holdings, but I think the top, you know, 3 or 4 or 5, that's some pretty low hanging fruit. Like Yoroi can pretty easily uh, get less delegation, you know? So we'll see what actually happens with this. The true mark of the effectiveness, like this is all pretty reasonable. I think this is a pretty reasonable response to this. The true mark of, you know, whether or not any of this that's described here is effective is whether or not the delegation goes down, you know? Emergo and Yoroi, do they have more or less voting power in 6 months or about the same? Is it a 1% decrease? Or, you know, can it be a 30% decrease, 50% decrease? That would be something. But, you know, whether or not we actually see a decrease in their voting power over the next 6 months, I don't know. What I would expect, call me glass half full, but what I would expect is even if they don't see a decrease in 6 months, what they will come back with is, oh, we were actually focused on this other part, the 75% who don't vote. So while we did do a bunch of stuff to decentralize, you know, our delegation, we also focused on getting people, you know, getting people who don't, you know, getting people to delegate to a DRep who, you know, don't, you know, don't normally delegate to an actual voting DRep or something like that. I think there's going to be some compensatory explanation as to why the delegation doesn't go down if it doesn't go down. But I wouldn't be surprised in 6 months if, you know, I won't even say that. I'll just say we should look in 6 months and see if Emergo and Yoroi have more, less, or about the same voting concentration as before. So that's the mark of whether or not anything actually happens here. If nothing happens, you know, maybe it's just talk, but you know, we'll see like in 6 months. So, and this is kind of interesting because I think the way this ties in to the controversy with Liquid, in the case of Liquid, it looks like we had an actual, I want to call it a promise, but those posts, it looks like a statement that could easily lead someone to believe they were going to get the ADA as a lender. In the case of Emergo, you have no such promises with respect to their governance delegation. You do have this implicit promise as a founding entity that they're going to do what's good for the ecosystem. So it's kind of this implied promise, right? I think we all assume that the CF, Emergo, and IOG are going to do what's good for the ecosystem. And I think it's all pretty black and white. We can all say the current concentration in delegation and voting delegation in the top 5 is too much. It's like way too much. So we'll see what actually happens. Fly over me says it's like going to IKEA. In what respect? What's that? What's that in reference to? Brown Beardo says what Yoroi could do is when the voting center goes live, their existing DRep address goes to auto abstain and create a new clean DRep and let its users decide. That would be an interesting experiment. And I think we all know that a lot of people would not give a damn. They would just stay in auto abstain for sure. Surely, some people would change, but I think a lot would just stay in auto abstain. Surely, most of Yoroi's current delegation is due to users unlocking their ADA staking rewards again. 100%. Yeah, I mean, the big carrot that got people to actually delegate to a DRep was the fact that they couldn't get their rewards unless they did it. So, you know, some people were smart enough to go to the auto abstain DRep right out of the gate. And a lot of them, you know, they just open up Yoroi wallet and they saw that they could delegate to Yoroi. So there they are. I don't think it's, I mean, I think we all understand if we're being realistic, it's not that they, for the vast majority of them, it's not that they believed deeply in the wisdom of whoever was going to be making the votes on behalf of your Roy wallet. It was just the easiest, most convenient thing to do because of the way it was structured inside the wallet. I think I think the vast majority of people would agree with that. When you go in, you can't get out. True. True. Yeah, well put. Yep. I agree. Brown Beardo says bingo. I agree. Well put. Well put. You delegate and you can't get out. That's why the abstain thing would be a good experiment. But actually, I think as far as I've seen though, Philip Pond seems to be a great addition to Emergo. And I think this is like a very reasonable post. Some of these things are kind of comparative straw men. Like, yeah, it would be good to decentralize the vote in the top 25, but like decentralizing the number 25 guy, that's like pretty high hanging fruit compared to Yoroi like deciding to decentralize their delegation, right? It's like the amount that the top 25 DRep has compared to Yoroi and Emergo combined is like laughable. The difference is like laughable. It's crazy, crazy difference. Okay. This is something kind of interesting. We talk about Caitlin Long as being kind of a pioneer of the whole Wyoming Speedy Bank thing. We all know now, as of last week, that Kraken got across the finish line first. Here we have some news on Caitlin Long's Custodia Bank. The 10th Circuit has rejected Custodia Bank's request for a full court rehearing in its master account fight with the Federal Reserve after a panel ruled in October that reserve banks have legal discretion to deny master account access. So this is really weird. You've got these state chartered banks, and it says it right here in the dissent. So the vote was 7-3 against rehearing the case. In dissent, judges Timkovich and Eid warned the ruling gives reserve banks unreviewable discretion to deny accounts to state chartered banks in contravention of the Monetary Control Act of 1980. So you've got these state chartered banks, right? And the expectation is they're going to be able to have goddamn routing numbers. And the court was like, nope, the Federal Reserve can just refuse to give you a master account. Caitlin Long sued their asses, and now she can't get a rehearing even after Kraken has made it all the way through. So this is Wyoming Crypto Bank, Custody Bank has filed this is from December, has filed a petition for rehearing en banc, meaning it's asking the full 10th Circuit to reconsider its October decision, siding with the Federal Reserve and denying Custodia a master account. So this is kind of a problem. Like, what good is a state chartered bank? I mean, what kind of a bank can a state chartered bank really be if the Federal Reserve can just turn around and refuse to give them a routing number? This is a really good argument for crypto, because if we just switch all the way over to crypto, nobody's going to give a damn about banks and routing numbers. And Caitlin Long could just do the Custodia Bank thing and give us all of the services we really want from a banking institution, and just do it all in crypto and not worry about the Federal Reserve and skinny master accounts and all of this nonsense. So speaking of that, Stan Druckenmiller, who is not your run-of-the-mill, Finbro podcast guy. There's a lot of those too. We could all name a handful of these sort of like finance bro podcast guests who make all the circuits. He's been on podcasts before, true, but he's a little bit more on the serious side. He's more of a real Wall Street guy. So this post says, billionaire Stan Druckenmiller says the global payment system will run on stable coins within 15 years because they're more efficient. This is how viral and penetrating the idea of stable coins is. Even Stan Druckenmiller understands that in 15 years, it's all over. It's all going to be stable coins. Even he gets it. So maybe Caitlin Long doesn't have to wait that long before, no pun intended, before she doesn't even need that skinny master account. So not trying to minimize how much it sucks for her right now, having said that. So here's some other news I always love to see. Ethereum is now projected to lose its spot as the second largest cryptocurrency. 57% chance Ethereum is flipped this year. So, what happened to Ethereum? Kind of, I don't even know what this T is supposed to be. I don't even know what ecosystem that's supposed to be. It doesn't look like Tether. Apparently, this meme is not having the intent on the effect on me they intended. But I think this is probably true. I think Ethereum knows they have not delivered. Ethereum has not delivered over the last several years. They're falling behind, and I don't even think it matters who overtakes them. Of course, the XRP army is going to say XRP. The Solana guys are going to say Solana. Um, but I think it's about time we have a little shakeup. If Ethereum could fall out of the number 2 spot, then I think it would be a meaningful change, and it would show the whole crypto ecosystem that you can't just rest on your laurels. We're actually in the tech innovation business, and Ethereum just hasn't delivered on that promise for a long time, really. Okay. Here is Caitlin Long. Obviously, she's going to be a little pissed right now about the en banc hearing not going in her direction. You'd think that with so many friendly things going on in Washington, friendly towards crypto, you'd think you'd have a chance with this 10th Circuit en banc hearing, but the judiciary is famously often not on the same page as the executive branch, the current executive branch. So maybe it's not that big a surprise, but you can imagine she's probably a little pissed right now. She makes a good point in this interview. So in this interview, if you want to try to find this, it's with this guy right here, who actually does a pretty good job on a lot of the crypto interviews. He's not, I don't think of him as like as interested in crypto as Maria Bartiromo. She definitely does a lot more of it, but he does a nice interview with Caitlin here where she points out something really important. The real money is in tokenized deposits. She says the whole thing is not, from her perspective, the whole thing is not the banks trying to get in on stable coins. It's just them tokenize. They just want to tokenize deposits. If you think about that for a second, it's kind of wild. In fact, this poster on here points it out, Dimitri here, I don't know who this is, but fully tokenized markets will be wild, but imagine rugging a deposit. That's next level pain. So I don't know about that second part, rugging the deposit, but fully tokenized deposits would be kind of wild. This would be a massive change in banking. And she thinks that's actually what the TradFi institutions are after. She doesn't think it's like so much that they want. The big thing for them is not the stable coins themselves. It's just tokenizing things like deposits because that's a much bigger market. She points out the difference in magnitude between the stablecoin market and the deposit market, and you already know which one is massively bigger. So Brambeardo says, that is such ass with Wyoming. You were the chosen one. That's a lot of market share to divvy up. That is a lot of market share to divvy up. That's right. A lot of market share. So, okay. We're getting some interesting news on the UFO front. On the UFO front, we're seeing a lot of rumors about this. And apparently they made it into a few publications. Trump's UFO disclosure could include videos and photos of non-human craft. And I haven't actually seen these articles, but I think they're all referencing Chris Mellon. Chris Mellon apparently he's been saying for a long time there's some like very, very persuasive photos and maybe videos that the U.S. government has. And recently, just in connection with these rumors, people have been saying a big part of the focus there is satellite photos of UFOs in orbit. So lower in orbit, if you want to call it orbit. I know people are going to quibble over what is near Earth orbit, an actual further out orbit, but what they're talking about here are UFOs, UAPs, if you wish, that can be seen by satellites. So that'd be like sort of, I guess depending on where the satellite is pointed, but you could imagine in between Earth and the satellites, just spacecraft hanging out in between the satellites and Earth, or I guess if the satellites are pointed in some other direction for some reason, within within camera shot of the satellites. But this could get really interesting. Obviously, I think anybody who's paying attention to the UFO topic for the last decade or so is really skeptical that we'll get anything amazing out of this disclosure movement, this new executive branch disclosure directive. But we'll see. We'll see how that all goes down. Steven Spielberg. People have been curious. Is he actually doing some kind of soft disclosure thing with this movie? Is this movie that's coming out Disclosure Day? Is this like some of his previous works that a lot of people regard as just soft disclosure of facts as opposed to fiction? People have been wondering that about this movie that's coming out this summer, Disclosure Day. In this interview, he just straight up says, I have a strong suspicion we are not alone on Earth, and I made a movie about it, right? Which I think is probably true. I think probably Steven Spielberg has some access to some people and knows some things that we wouldn't be exposed to, right? He probably a lot of people who have information that like I wouldn't have access to are willing to tell Steven Spielberg things, right? So I can imagine he's heard some things. He's probably heard a lot of things, especially since he's the guy. He's like the original guy that was making blockbusters about aliens. I can imagine over the last, what do we got, 40 years or so, he's heard some things from people, the sort of aggregate of which make him believe we're not alone on Earth. And I think I agree with him. Just like not having his access, just looking at everything that's publicly available. I agree. I also have a strong suspicion we are not alone on Earth and haven't been for a long, long, long time. Probably never been alone. On the IR front, what's going on? So this is the Institute for the Study of War. They've got this report. The war in Iran is currently in a phase in which the military trajectory is relatively positive. The United States is steadily destroying Iran's ability to use its most essential tool in the war, drone and missile attacks, which in turn underpin their entire strategy. Iran has still done some damage to U.S. forces, and it is still firing drones and missiles, though the overall attack rate is slowly decreasing. These attacks still pale in comparison to the major attacks Iran sought to conduct in an existential war and have caused neither operationally significant damage nor widespread casualties. Some casualties, but not as much as Iran promised. The U.S.-Israeli combined force will need time to achieve its military objectives and prevent Iran from inflicting further political and economic pain upon the U.S. and its allies. But the campaign remains incomplete and it is too soon to forecast its outcome. Declaring it an operational failure is unquestionably premature. This seems accurate to me. So this is a subject of quite a bit of speculation. Unconfirmed, so this is an unconfirmed report. According to Kuwaiti News, Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, after suffering injuries during joint U.S.-Israeli strikes, was secretly transported to Moscow and underwent surgery there. According to reports, he is currently still in country in Russia. That would explain a lot. That would actually explain quite a bit. So this is also kind of an emerging theme in the Iran conflict. American oil executives have told Trump administration the energy crisis the Iran war has unleashed is likely to get worse, according to Wall Street Journal reports. And that only got worse this weekend. One of the things we talked about last summer during the sort of U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, there is a certain island in the Persian Gulf that has like almost the entire, it's like a bottleneck for all Iranian oil production. And there was a question we discussed it on this channel during the previous strikes last summer. Would the U.S. and Israel strike that island with this sort of infrastructure bottleneck? Because if they did, it would sort of seize up a huge amount of the ability of Iran to export oil. And that actually happened this weekend. We actually saw strikes on that island. And it was already a big question the how much the energy markets were going to be affected by just the restriction in the ability of ships to transit the Strait of Hormuz, which was already going on and which we've addressed on this channel. Now we have an actual strike on Karg Island, right? Which was the big one that everybody knew would really affect the energy markets. So now we're going to see. It's sort of like they finally decided to unleash hell on the energy markets. And nobody needs to tell you this could be a very big factor in the midterm elections. If the price of gas in the US goes way, way up, that's something that the vast majority of US voters get affected by. True, a lot of people with EVs now, but the price of gas is always going to be something that will be a high profile item for voters. So, you'd imagine that the Trump administration is going to be paying a lot of attention to what happens with the price of gas. True, they can lean on OPEC. The Saudis have a very prominent role in OPEC. Um, you know, we have some influence with other members of OPEC, so they can lean on OPEC to try to do things to alleviate some of the problems created by this. But you can't really wage a war against Iran and expect that oil prices are going to be unaffected. So we'll see how that turns out. But I think that's going to be a big theme. People will be talking about that a lot this year, as long as the conflict is ongoing. On the positive front, there was sort of an emerging conflict. It's been going on for a long time, but sort of a heightening conflict between the rulers of Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And apparently there was some kind of a détente now, some kind of a phone call. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan affirmed in a phone call that continued Iranian attacks on GCC countries represents a dangerous escalation, threatening regional security and stability. Reuters reported, citing Saudi state media. No surprise when they're both getting missile and drone attacked by Iran, who they both hate anyways, that they can find, newfound peace and reason for unity in their hatred of the regime in Tehran. But we'll see how long this lasts. There's still like sort of mad conflict between these two personalities. So we'll see and that kind of erupted over the last like several weeks on social media, especially. The representatives of these two governments were kind of having it out in a war of words on X, especially. But I think that is pretty much all the news that's going on. So tomorrow I kind of expect this will sort of come to a head. We'll probably get something. Let's see, where's it at? Where's there? We'll probably get something on this. This was on the 14th. Hey, Charles, we understand where you and others in the community are coming from. We will have next steps to share shortly. I think we'll probably hear something in the next couple of days from Liquid about what they're going to do with this. They're going to take the route that Charles suggested or something else. We'll probably hear about that. Let's see. On this, will see how it turns out with this concentration of vote delegation in Emergo and Yoroi. I think Philip Pond is probably a great executive for Emergo to have at the head of the organization. However, I think the only real measure of this is like in 6 months, do they have more or less or the same, right? That's the real thing. No matter what rhetoric is put out there, and this all seems very reasonable. I think this is a very reasonable response. This is like a great post, but the real measure, the words are one thing, but the real measure is in 6 months, do they have the same amount of delegation, less or more? That's the real thing. So we're going to find out about some things having to do with promises, both sort of explicit promises in the one case, and these more implied promises to kind of do what's good for the ecosystem on the other hand. But I hope everybody had a good weekend. So as you know, as some of you will remember, probably not many, but some of you will remember that St. Patrick's Day is actually the birthday of this channel. This channel was launched on St. Patrick's Day purposefully. St. Patrick's Day was chosen purposefully, but St. Patrick's Day is the birthday of this channel, and I'm working hard every day. I'm hoping I can show you something on the birthday of this channel. So we'll see. It's going to be a little bit of a race, and I may not make it, but I'm hoping to show you something on St. Patrick's Day. So we'll see how that goes. And St. Patrick's Day, of course, is not a good day to do that because I assume, even though it's like on a Tuesday, I assume some people will be out partying nonetheless. So it's probably not a great day to do it, but we'll see if I can show you something new I've been working on St. Patrick's Day. But I hope everybody had a great weekend. I hope you're looking forward to a great week, and I'll talk to you soon.